So who is the new Northwest Premier Bushy Maape? We hear from him, hear from the man himself, and he joins us now via Zoom for that conversation. Mr. Maape, thank you for your time. This is meant to sort of, be an intimate conversation that sort of gets the viewers to understand you more so that they know, your worldview and where you come from, what experiences have shaped the politician that you are before really going into the trenches and challenging you in the months and years to come as you occupy the position of Premier. So with that said, then let me ask you, what does the question, who is Bushy Maape, what does the answer to that question entail in your own view? How do you describe yourself?
Good afternoon, Thulasizwe, and good afternoon to your viewers in Milan, South Africa. I'm a South African. I'm a person who very early in life became politically aware, due mainly to the influence of my father, who was not a politician, but who was aware of political happenings around him. I recall that it was somewhere 1962 or 63, and he was coming back from work, and he had his cap facing the back of his head. And my mother asked him, "What's wrong with your cap? And why are you wearing it like that?" And he explained, "It's my buye." And I'm speculating that there's a time of the Rivonia trial. That's when he had his cap like that. But from then onwards, I interacted with others who really shaped my political understanding.
Let's talk a bit about your activism before Robben Island. You were active in the ANC underground, were you not? What did that entail?
I started quite early with my political activism. I think I was in what was called then Form 1. I think it's Standard 7. When I started writing, compositions that were not, somehow making my school principal happy. And I ended up in an office of a special branch. I don't know how my essays ended up there. But then I was asked a lot of questions. And most of the questions they put to me, I could not answer. I was just a young boy, a child, so to speak. But on the wall of the offices, I see a number of pictures. A picture of Mandela, a poster of SWAPO. And, these things, I kept on thinking about them and researching about these issues. And so quite early, when I was in Standard 10, we tried in our area in Vryburg to establish SASM. And it was the time when SASO tried to establish, a people's organization called SASM. And that's when I started with my activism. And then I made contact in 1977 with the ANC whilst I was a student at Hebron, training to be a teacher. And that's where I met Aitken Ramudzuli there through one student at that training college from Orlando East, one Ronnie, and that's when my involvement in the ANC started. But then, things developed quite quickly, and I linked up with Lesotho through the able hands of one really of the underground masters, Caleb Motsabi in Bloemfontein. That the old man was a master at the art of underground. And he linked me up with Lesotho. And I was given the responsibility, and I was going to do this with others, to re-establish the ANC underground in the Northern Cape. That was the responsibility. And later on, we were transferred from Lesotho to Botswana because of our area's proximity to Botswana. And then we established what we called the Kalahari political military machinery. With others like, Jomo Kasu, Daki Africa, Koni Litimela, Victor Makoke, Lita Monare, Muliki Pelo, and others. We formed this that was called the Kalahari machinery. And we reported initially to Victor Makosini, who is Jerry Machila, who was our ambassador at the United Nations. But that's very briefly how we started this. The key responsibility was to revive the underground in the Northern Cape then.
So while you talk about the underground movement in the Kgalagadi area, the name of Moses Ntehelang comes to mind. This is, of course, the man who was, whose remains were exhumed in 2015, who had been a victim of Eugene de Kock during the apartheid security era. Just how much of, tell me a bit about Moses Ntehelang. You were there at the exhumation. Just tell me about what that chapter represents and his life, what it represents in your life.
It's a little bit of mixed emotions that are aroused in me when I think about Ntehelang. I personally, crossed the border with him. I took him to Botswana. And somehow when he returned, he was captured. And under duress, of course, he was forced to join the Askaris. And at one stage, he absconded. And I think this was an effort to break from the Askaris. And they hunted him down, and they found him. And they killed him. And they buried him in a shallow grave near Zeerust. And we went there the first day with one ex-special branch member who the first time, I don't know whether he could not locate the shallow grave or he was just playing games. And then somehow the assistance of Eugene de Kock helped us. Because when Eugene de Kock was there, it was easy, and the person quickly identified the shallow grave, and the body was exhumed. And as I was sitting there, I was just thinking about him. And I was just thinking about what he went through. You are arrested and under duress, you are forced to join this notorious group, and you try to escape, and you are hunted down, and you are killed. And today, when I see what some of us are doing, where we don't really appreciate that others died for this freedom that we are enjoying today, this makes me sad. Because Ntehelang was a young man, quite brave. And I think the fact that he was captured and forced to join these bandits, worried him. And because of his political consciousness, he wanted to really escape from this group. And so he was killed. And when we exhumed him there, I was with Mam Ruth Mumpati, my godmother, and with Tebogo Kibutlale, one of the MK combatants. And like I said, I was quite sad when I went through his history.
So when you talk about him, then I imagine that you observe keenly developments around prosecuting apartheid-era crimes. That's been a topic that's been quite dominant recently, because I imagine that before, that whole process with the exhumation, you also had questions that you wanted to be answered, and I imagine that, the family of Ntehelang wanted justice, etc. What's your thinking when you look at those developments? I hear you talk about how some people don't appreciate that people died for some of these freedoms, but that ultimate price being paid, some families remain with questions, more questions than answers, and some are still, hoping for some kind of justice.
Thulasizwe, the people of South Africa understand this, that he's not the only one. There are many others. And in fact, my younger brother who comes after me, he was also arrested and captured and tortured and tortured. When he was sentenced, I met him in prison. And, he told me about the torture he went through. And after his release, he didn't live for long. And then he died. And then one other comrade of mine, very close friend of mine, Thabo Morosi, he was also captured in what was then called Botswana. And he was tortured, And when he was released, he could not recognize his mother, he could not recognize his family, and he didn't also live for long, and he died. And there are many others like him, in South Africa. The question of making people pay for their deeds is a complex question. The ANC itself, it's a compassionate organization. It's a very forgiving organization, and here we are. We are just saying to people, come and admit that you did this, and that will be enough so that we find closure to these issues. We are not talking here about punishment. We are here talking about helping us to find closure so that, we can deal with these things. Because every day we think about those people, and it will be good if somebody can say, yes, I did it. I was kept in a cell in Mafikeng, when I was arrested. And, in that cell, it's blood stains, and I don't know why don't they clean the blood stains. And I was just thinking, who was here before me? And why was he tortured to an extent that there is blood on the floor of the cell? Like I said, we paid dearly for this freedom. Yeah. Very dearly.
I want to preserve the conversation about Robben Island and the experiences there for, the second part of our conversation. So let me steer clear of that, but stick with the theme of people not conducting our democracy in a manner that shows an appreciation of the sacrifices that were made by generations of young people, such as the names that you've mentioned there, yourself included, and those who paid the ultimate price. What does that manifest? How does that manifest that lack of understanding that this democracy came at a high price? What does it look like, particularly in your own organization? People who should really know what the price was for many of the freedom fighters.
Again, Thulasizwe, to criticize and so on, I prefer more looking at how to go forward, how to try and repair what has been broken. To sit here and say they are doing this, they are doing that, for me, does not really help that much. I think I want to say, what is it that we can do?
Yeah.
To really focus on doing what the ANC promised the people of South Africa, a better life. And I think steps are being taken now to try and produce the kind of public representative that will understand that I am a servant of the people. And the efforts that are being made, among others, the training that is given to cadres of the ANC through the OR Tambo School, which is not only emphasizing political education, but also putting emphasis on technical training to acquire skills so that when you are elected into a position, you have the political understanding, but at the same time, you have skills to contribute to the improvement, to the betterment of the lives of our people. I think for me, that is what is quite key.
All right. Let's pause there for a moment, Premier. I'll come back to you. And, of course, we'll touch on the big chapter of your life that has to do with time spent on Robben Island, because that's one of the first things you've been hearing recently whenever the name Bushy Maape is being mentioned, that he was among the first 6 prisoners to be released in 1990. So we go there after this short break. This is the Intel on eNCA.